Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So on behalf of Montgomery Planning, we are so glad that you could join us for this webinar on the tree planting and reforestation programs that we offer through the department's Reforest Montgomery program. So my name is Kristen Taddy. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I joined Montgomery Planning 4 years ago, and I started Reforest Montgomery at that time. Shortly after we launched the program, Mia joined our team, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm Mia Rothberg, and I joined the program about 3 years ago. I manage our tree planting programs, and Kristen manages our reforestation programs.
So we're having this webinar in celebration of the 3rd anniversary of Reforest Montgomery and Arbor Day, which is coming up later this week on Friday. This presentation is going to be about 30 minutes. And as Mia and I go through the slides, feel free to ask any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we will address as many as we can during the second half of today's session. Also, this webinar does qualify for Landscape Architect Continuing Education credits. So Emily will be sending out an email to all attendees with the competency quiz after the webinar. So just be on the lookout for that. So first, you may be curious where the funding for Reforest Montgomery comes from. The fund that supports these programs is the Forest Conservation Fund, which is generated by certain development projects that need to meet requirements of the Forest Conservation Law. In 1991, the state of Maryland passed the Forest Conservation Act to regulate the removal of forests by certain types of projects and also to grow new forests in the state. Most counties and some municipalities in the state have since adopted their own stronger versions of this law, and that includes Montgomery County. So 1 year later, in 1992, Montgomery County passed its own forest conservation law. It's a long and complicated law, but the primary requirement for projects that are subject to the law is to submit a forest conservation plan, which sets a forest mitigation requirement for that project. So one way that some projects might meet that requirement is by making a fee in lieu payment, which generates the Forest Conservation Fund. And it's that fund that we use to program Reforest Montgomery. There were several programs that this fund supported before Reforest Montgomery. So those of you who have been following along for a while might remember Shades of Green or Leaves for Neighborhoods. In 2020, we incorporated those existing programs into Reforest Montgomery and added several new and expanded programs. So when someone makes a fee in lieu payment to meet a forest mitigation requirement intended to reforest, let's say a 1/4 acre, we meet that requirement by planting at least a 1/4 acre of trees and forests through our programs. But we can often make that funding go further by working creatively with our wonderful partners. So for example, we have received the equivalent of 64 acres worth of fee in lieu contributions to date, and we've reforested 90 acres through the program to date. So if you're curious to learn more about fee in lieu, I highly recommend checking out our webpage on the Forest Conservation Fund, which we will share a link to at the end of the presentation. In recent news, we have a new goal as a county of achieving no net loss of forest countywide, meaning that between forest planting and forest protection by projects subject to the law, our goal through a combination of law and policy is to see the number of acres of forest planted be greater than the number of acres cleared throughout the county. And as a county, we've been getting closer to this goal for the past 10 years or so. But last month, the County Council passed the No Net Loss of Forest Amendment to strengthen the forest conservation law and help us get closer to achieving this goal. Also, findings from a recent report, often referred to as the Hughes study, underscores the importance of increasing planting and protection efforts in Montgomery County and across the state. The report found that tree canopy loss was significant in the county during the 5-year period 2013 to 2018. And when it comes to our forests, the report noted significant fragmentation and competition from invasive species and issues of concern. But the good news is that everyone who participates in Reforest Montgomery is able to contribute to addressing these issues and achieving no net loss of forest in the county.
So before we get deeper into the Reforest Montgomery programs, we'll first ask the question, why is it important to grow our canopy? We like to think about the benefits of trees and forests in terms of the United Nations 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and economic. Forests and even individual trees provide a variety of benefits directly to the environment. They increase biodiversity by providing habitat for birds and other pollinators. They mitigate climate change by sequestering carbon dioxide. They filter pollutants in both the air and water, and they help to reduce flooding by managing water flow. Forests provide these benefits on a much larger scale, but even individual trees contribute, benefiting the environment directly and humans indirectly. For example, trees in your yard can help to reduce flooding that may impact your home. Trees especially provide direct benefits to the people who live among them. They cool the surrounding areas through shading and evapotranspiration, which is the release of cool water from their leaves that turns into a vapor. This helps to both reduce heat-related illness and home energy needs, especially in our hottest months. They can also directly increase home and commercial property values through their beauty, through slowing car traffic, and by increasing pedestrian traffic. Spending time among trees, especially in forests, has also been shown to reduce stress and improve your mood, even without exercising. As we alluded to earlier, Reforest Montgomery has 3 tree planting programs and 3 reforestation programs. Today, I'll be going over the tree planting programs, and then Kristen will be going over the reforestation programs. Of the tree programs, 2 are for private properties and 1 is for properties operated by Montgomery Parks. The first is our native tree discount program. This program started around 2010 under the name Leaves for Neighborhoods and was initially $20 before steadily increasing in value to now being worth $50 off a tree costing at least $75. Since the coupon was brought under the Reforest Montgomery umbrella, we have reimbursed over 1,750 coupons for trees throughout Montgomery County and expanded the qualifying species list to include nearly 50 tree species. There are currently 6 participating nurseries around the county, and each offers a different selection of trees with different benefits. If you know of a nursery that may be a good fit for this program that isn't on this list, please let us know. It's also important to note that this is our only private property program that is open to all properties in Montgomery County, regardless of ownership or location in the county. 4 of the 6 nurseries that participate in our program also participate in the $25 Marylanders Plant Trees coupon program. This program operates in a similar way to ours, but with a slightly different list of qualifying trees. For reference, about 60% of the trees on our coupon also qualify for the state coupon. At the nurseries that participate in both programs, customers can combine the 2 coupons to receive $75 off dually qualifying trees worth at least $75. That means people can purchase $75 trees at no out-of-pocket cost. The way the coupon works is the customer receives $50 off their tree at the point of purchase at the nursery. The nursery will ask the customer to fill out a coupon with information including their address and the tree species, and will then mail the coupon to our team for reimbursement. We keep track of each coupon used in an internal map that looks like this one to understand trends on species, price, and location. Although the Reforest Montgomery team has no direct communication with community members purchasing trees through this program, we provide a variety of resources on our website to assist with all stages of the process. First, we have a list of all the qualifying trees on the back of the coupon sorted by size. On our website, we have more information about each type of tree, including ideal soil, ideal sunlight, and whether it's deer resistant or climate change resilient. We also include notable qualities about each tree that may be of interest to potential planters. There are a few different ways to use this list. For example, if you're starting from scratch and open to any tree, we'd recommend starting with our suitable habitat column and looking for descriptors that match your space in terms of soil and sunlight. If your yard is frequented by deer, we'd also recommend looking for a tree they may be less attracted to, marked deer resistant. Alternatively, if you have an idea of what tree you want, you can check if it's eligible for the program and if it matches your needs in terms of space. Next, we have a guide on how to plant a tree. Some of the nurseries that participate in this program offer planting services, but for those that don't or people who want to get their hands dirty, we provide a 7-step process on how to properly plant trees for the best chance at survival. Step 8 in this process is signing up for Reforest Montgomery watering alerts, an email alert system that lets you know whenever it's especially hot or dry and includes this helpful video on different watering methods. Young trees need 25 gallons of water a week from roughly April to November, and rainfall usually isn't enough. You can sign up for these alerts on our website, and this video is also available on Montgomery Planning's YouTube channel. Our second program is our Free Shade Tree program. This program has existed since roughly 2012. Until 2019, it was called Shades of Green, and eligibility was limited to only the most urban areas of the county, like downtown Silver Spring and the Georgia Avenue corridor to Wheaton. Since the start of Reforest Montgomery, we have expanded the eligibility and increased the regularity of planting seasons, organizing a fall and spring planting season each year. We have planted 320 trees through this program since the start of Reforest Montgomery with the help of our contractors Casey Trees and Stadler Nurseries. Stadler also participates in our coupon program, and Casey Trees is a nonprofit based in DC. The first eligibility requirement for this program is that your property lies within one of the orange priority funding areas shown on this map. These are the most of the urban and suburban regions in the county and target areas where most development is occurring and thus where most of the funding for this program comes from. You might notice that certain areas aren't included in this. Rockville and Gaithersburg are two areas clearly cut out along I-270. This is because they have their own planning departments and developments in their jurisdiction are not subject to the Montgomery County Forest Conservation Law and thus do not contribute to the Forest Conservation Fund that funds this program. These and other jurisdictions with their own departments frequently have their own tree planting programs that we recommend looking into. Since our fall 2022 season, we have also prioritized applications from equity focus areas outlined in red on this map. These are census tracts identified by our department with high percentages of low-income people, people of color, people who speak English less than very well, and other communities that have historically been excluded from the planning process. Following national trends, these census tracts are also among those with the least tree canopy in the county. We begin accepting applications through a form on our website on a first-come, first-served basis each year on February 1st to receive trees the following fall and October 1st to receive trees the following spring. These applications are highly competitive due to the popularity of our program, and we typically fill up within several hours of the application opening. We don't keep a wait list, so if we're unable to accommodate your application, we just ask that you reapply the following season. We prioritize applications from equity focus areas received within a week of applications opening. This prioritization is important as prior to implementing this system, we are planting very few trees, if any, in EFAs each season. The biggest two ways people hear about our program are through word of mouth from their neighbors and seeing one of our free tree signs in their neighborhood, so we're working hard to establish a base in these areas. Prior to the last couple of months, we had a 50 tree cap on the number of trees we could plant each season. We're currently in the process of increasing this number to plant roughly 150 trees each year across our two planting seasons. We have a limit of 6 trees per property each season to ensure multiple people have a chance at trees, but we allow people to reapply as long as their property has space. For this program, we're willing to plant on all kinds of properties, from private homes to HOAs, religious buildings, and schools. After we select the people who will be considered for trees, we reach out and schedule a home site visit with each person. We meet at their property to talk through what they're looking for and observe the planting conditions to make recommendations on tree species and location. While there, we also talk them through the process using this Steps to Free Shade Trees guide and help them select trees using our shade tree selection list. This list has a profile for each of the 21 trees that we offer through this program and information including size, ideal conditions, a description, and fall colors. This helps us work with people to pick a tree that fits their needs and wants. This list is also available on our website, so community members interested in purchasing these trees on their own can use this as a resource as well. A few days after the site visit, we send homeowners a map of the proposed planting that looks like this one, with tree locations and species labeled. At that point, we ask for their approval and encourage people to take their time to ensure they're getting what they're looking for. Once we have all the approvals for the planting season, we divide the properties between our two contractors and send them the planting plans to pass along to their crews. Once they have a planting date, they submit missed utility tickets to have all the utilities on the property marked about 2 weeks in advance. 1 week in advance, a member of our team stops by to put labeled flags in each planting location, adjusting them slightly to avoid utilities if necessary. After the contractor plants the trees and invoices us for them, we return to the property a final time to inspect the trees and ensure they are planted per our standards. These photos show a yard at a few different stages of our process. The photo on the left shows the yellow missed utility markings on this property and our red flags marking the future tree locations. And the photo on the right shows the recently planted trees. The trees planted through this program are typically roughly 6 to 8 feet tall and are staked at planting to help them grow straight. For front yard trees, we also ask people to host a sign that says, "This tree was free," to promote our program to their neighbors or anyone that may be passing by. And the most important thing for people who receive trees through this program to do is give the trees adequate water. We provide watering instructions several times throughout the process, including in step 8 of this document, and encourage them to sign up for our watering alerts as well. All the trees are also covered by a 1-year warranty offered by our contractors, so we ask people to stay in touch with us if their tree begins to show signs of stress. The final tree planting program we have involves transplanting large trees on parkland owned by Montgomery Parks. These trees are typically 4 to 7 inches in diameter and are transplanted from Montgomery Park's Pope Farm to parkland around the county. The locations are selected in consultation with staff from a variety of divisions within the Parks Department. We typically solicit suggestions from the parks managers who manage the crews that maintain the parks, and then run the locations by staff in the administrative divisions to ensure we won't be getting in the way of any future plans. This program is separate from a very similar program funded by Montgomery Parks. The difference is that the Parks program is only able to fund plantings in a rotating set of areas each year, whereas we can plant anywhere in the county, so we frequently exchange tree locations with them based on their availability. We work closely with park staff throughout this process, and the final species for each site are ultimately selected by Pope Farm staff with our approval. These programs are essential, as Pope Farm is working through a set of trees that have gotten too large to plant through other, cheaper means. This program started as a pilot with 55 trees transplanted in fall of 2016. Since the launch of Reforest Montgomery in 2020, we have transplanted about 40 trees a year into 20 different parks. This is a video of a tree planting. We call these trees spade trees because our contractors use a spade truck to transplant them, a truck with 4 shovel-like spades attached to the back that work in tandem to dig up the tree at the farm. The truck is then loaded up with a tarp around the back to prevent anything from falling out and driven to the park. In this case, we're taking it to Nolte Park in Silver Spring. The tree is placed into a hole that the truck dug earlier that day, and then the crew adds mulch to protect the root systems and provide extra nutrients, and the tree is set. These trees provide benefits much more quickly than smaller trees, offering shade to playgrounds or other areas of parks and immediate habitat to birds and other pollinators. They also have a significantly higher survivability rate than small trees, as they're large enough to be able to handle small stresses. And with that, I will pass it on to Kristen.
Thanks, Mia. So in this next section, I'll provide an overview of the 3 reforestation programs of Reforest Montgomery, including 2 which offer free reforestation to private property owners within the county. So first, we'll focus on reforestation on county parkland. So Reforest Montgomery's Park Reforestation Program is a partnership with our commission colleagues in the Parks Department, and it's also our longest running fee in lieu program, which started around 2008. All of the woody vegetation, or trees and shrubs, that we plant through this program are grown at Montgomery Park's Pope Farm. They're not typically quite as large as those Pope Farm plants using one of the spade trucks that Mia showed. These trees are around 1 inch in caliber, or trunk diameter. So we receive recommendations for planting opportunities and guidance from Parks staff in coordinating this program, and have reforested 70 acres through the program to date, and since Reforest Montgomery launched, about 2 to 5 acres per year. This is, of course, separate from the Parks Department's own tree planting, reforestation, and restoration efforts, which are extensive. And we have a link to Parks tree planting map on our website if you're interested in exploring those efforts carried out separately by the Parks Department. And because this program has been around for 15 years, we are starting to see closed forest canopy and dynamic forest ecosystems develop in some of our earliest plantings. So this was an 8-acre planting in Watts Branch Stream Valley Park in the Travilla area, very close to the WSSC water filtration plant. About 1,400 trees were planted here in phases over about 3 years. So Mia, if you could actually just go back 2 slides. This is the same forest. This photo was taken the same day in 2022. And as you can see, you can walk into a forest that has reached canopy closure and started to shade out some of the invasive plants that used to grow there. We do prioritize reforestation projects within certain priority areas in the county whenever possible. There are 4 watersheds that are high priority. They include the Lower Potomac, Cabin John Creek, Rock Creek, and Anacostia River watersheds. These are the watersheds that have the lowest forest cover and highest rate of forest loss over the past 20 years, and where it's important to reforest as much as possible. We also prioritize the special protection areas of the county. SPAs are shown in green on this map and are set in our environmental guidelines to protect high quality or sensitive environmental features. And to date, about 2/3 of all Reforest Montgomery reforestation projects have taken place within one of these priority areas. When we're working with park staff to consider areas for reforestation, we're looking for opportunities to expand forests by planting out the edge and also replace forest loss due to invasive pressure, pests, storms, or heat stress. For example, after we lost a significant number of our native ash trees in our parks due to emerald ash borer, we leveraged Reforest Montgomery to replace that canopy lost with supplemental planting of native trees, primarily in Rock Creek Park. A forested area in declining health also presents an opportunity to plant the understory or open patches where the canopy is not contiguous. And we know that forested stream valley buffers lead to improved water quality, so we also seek opportunities to reforest those areas. And we can assist with other goals through reforestation as well, such as reducing the amount of time and resources spent on continued mowing in parks. And thanks to Mia, we have a great story map on our website, which highlights a handful of our Reforest Montgomery Park reforestation sites, including before and after photos, slideshows, and more information about each planting. So I encourage you to check that out. And also embedded at montgomeryplanning.org/reforest, we also have an interactive map where you can explore all Reforest Montgomery projects, both those that have already been planted and those we are planning. So this may be interested to you if you'd like to see if any plantings have occurred near where you live. Now onto our free reforestation programs for private property owners. So first, we will review how to apply for free reforestation through Reforest Montgomery. The free reforestation program is our newest program. It started a couple of years ago in 2021. We have reforested 5 acres to date and are averaging about 2 to 5 acres planted per year. This program is completely free for eligible private property owners. And to be eligible, you must either already have an established Category 1 forest conservation easement on your property, and within that easement, at least a 1/4 acre should be open for planting. Or if you don't already have a Category 1 forest conservation easement, but you're open to recording one and you have at least an acre available for planting adjacent to a stream or forest, you are also eligible to apply for Reforest Montgomery for free reforestation. So Category 1 forest conservation easements protect land for forests by limiting certain activities. These easements are perpetual, they're held by the commission, and they are recorded in the county's land records. They typically prohibit removing vegetation, structures of any kind, and motorized equipment without permission from Montgomery Planning. If you're unsure whether there's a Category 1 easement on your property and would like to check, you can use our Find an Easement tool, which we'll provide a link to at the end as well. We also try to prioritize applications for free reforestation in the same way that we prioritize opportunities to reforest parkland. However, even if you live outside of one of these areas, I would encourage you to apply, as we typically can still schedule your planting in a reasonable timeframe. So once your application is accepted, the process takes about 6 months to a year, and it looks something like this. We start with the initial site visits and planning phase in the spring and summer. During this time, property owners will review a plan for planting and maintenance that we prepare and then approve that plan. Then starting in the fall, there may be some site prep to manage any invasives before the planting, and planting could happen anytime between fall and the following spring. So we also work with property owners to determine and provide continued maintenance, which might include ongoing invasive management and watering. We do also install metal deer caging to protect young trees from buck rub, and we'll plan to have that caging removed at the end of our involvement at 5 years. The photo on the right here is from our pilot planting in 2021, actually. This was taken mid-planting before the deer caging and stakes were installed. So this here is a simplified example of a reforestation plan. There are typically a few additional pages of detail that are not shown here, but reforestation areas are usually outlined and the number of trees to be planted is set in this plan. It also includes details on the plan for any site prep, the list of species requested, and the timeline. And once property owners approve the plan, this is also what we share with our contractor, which is Empire Landscape at the moment, to reference as they carry out the project. And finally, the final program we'll discuss today is Relief the Reserve. So this program is also free for property owners in the agricultural reserve. It began as a pilot in 2019, and we have reforested 15 acres since then, roughly 3 to 6 acres per year. And it provides options to address a number of concerns in areas adjacent to agricultural fields that are not suitable for farming. The agricultural reserve is a 93,000 acre area of Montgomery County, making up just under a third of the northern areas of the county. It was created in 1980 by the Montgomery County Council and is designed to protect farmland and agriculture through a suite of different tools. So we work with our nonprofit partner, Montgomery Countryside Alliance, to offer free reforestation through Relief the Reserve. MCA accepts applications, proposes a selection of native species, and coordinates with property owners. Meanwhile, Planning's forest conservation staff review the planting plan, easement, and memorandum of understanding, which is the document that sets the roles and responsibilities of MCA, planning, and the landowner. And we also inspect the trees after planting and assess survival after the maintenance period. So in this final section, we will share some of the techniques we use for reforestation and also some of the most common challenges that we face and how we address them in the field. Our traditional method of reforestation and what we use most of the time is planting either 100 1.5 to 2 inch caliper trees per acre or 200 3/4 to 1 inch caliper trees per acre. And we hold ourselves to different survivability requirements depending on which ratio is used. We also make sure that trees are spaced at least 6 feet apart to allow a mower to pass between them if needed for invasive maintenance, but eventually the goal is to cease mowing altogether. We may plant more than 100 or 200 trees in order to assume some loss, and we also sometimes phase reforestation efforts in order to allow trees' canopies to grow and start offering shade, which is then when we might plant a second phase of shade-tolerant understory trees and shrubs. There are several other methods for reforestation as well. One is the Miyawaki method, which concentrates small seedlings at a high density. Typically, the examples I've seen have focused on creating smaller microforests with this technique. The example pictured here is from Cambridge, Massachusetts. And additionally, we've seen some natural regeneration or native trees sprouting on their own from a seed bank in the soil in areas where mowing has stopped. So I've seen this happen more often in stream buffers or floodplains when those native trees are in forests or patches nearby. And from left to right here, on the left, you can see naturally regenerated sycamore trees in an area where we did a traditional reforestation and mowing had stopped. In the middle are naturally regenerating ash trees in a section of Rock Creek Park. And on the right is a mature forest that was achieved entirely through natural regeneration on a private property in Dickerson. This was a former agricultural field, and the primary species in this forest are tulip poplar and eastern red cedar. So when it comes to the challenges we face when planting trees and forests in the county, climate change is really the cause of most of the issues we face. We are already experiencing increasing intensity and fluctuations in our weather events, including heat waves, storms, and flooding. In Maryland, our average temperature has increased 2 degrees since 1895, and we're expecting a 6-degree increase in the next 25 to 30 years. And trees and forests are incredible infrastructure that help to mitigate the effects of climate change through evapotranspiration and by capturing stormwater. However, the long-term health and longevity of trees and forests are also affected by flooding and increased heat. So different native trees have unique tolerances to these conditions and may or may not be able to withstand them. On the right here is an image of a resource that we use often in our work, produced by the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science in consultation with USDA, the U.S. Forest Service, and American Forests. It shows how native species in the Mid-Atlantic region are projected to handle different climate change projections. It has data on adaptability, changing habitat, and capability of trees to withstand these stressors. So we'll share a link to this resource at the end of the presentation as well. And in order to make sure we're creating resilient forests and landscapes, we make sure that the trees we select for these projects are projected to withstand future conditions. And the future can be hard to predict, so diversity is also really important. One rule we try to stick to as much as possible is the 10-20-30 rule. So no more than 10% of any particular species, 20% of any one genus, or 30% of any single family. That way, if a new pest starts to affect a certain species, there are many more other surviving species in the forest to maintain longevity. And finally, we also look at current conditions of a site when selecting trees to plant there. We ask, what's growing there now? Do we want more of that species, or do we want to diversify? Is it a wet area? Is there a lot of sun, a lot of shade? What's the invasive situation or the deer situation? And then we plan accordingly. So thank you so much. We are going to move into a Q&A shortly here. Just a reminder to go ahead and enter your questions into the Q&A box. Emily is monitoring and we'll have some questions ready for us in a moment. Before we do, I just want to share the list of resources. So Emily is going to paste these links into the chat for you. So feel free to copy and paste these to save them for your own reference later. First, if you have any questions for us that we don't get to during the Q&A, please email us at reforest@montgomeryplanning.org. We love to hear from you. I also want to point out that our main webpage is montgomeryplanning.org/reforest. So that's where you can go to find information, application forms, sign up for our quarterly newsletter, and we'll be introducing a new section on tree care and tree selection resources on our webpage in the next few weeks, so you can keep an eye out for that. Okay, please go ahead and enter your questions into the Q&A box if you haven't already. And Emily, do we have any questions to start with in the Q&A?
Yes, we do. So the first one is, who in Montgomery County handles/protects against cutting down 100-plus-year-old trees to make way for new home renovations and mixed-use commercial developments? In Bethesda, we are fortunate to have 100-plus-year-old tulip poplars, beech, maples, oaks, and it is criminal that these are being cut down. Who protects this suburban/urban canopy?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for that. So unfortunately, Montgomery County as a whole does not have an ordinance or a law that protects individual trees or older trees. We do have several laws that require mitigation in these cases. So one of them, as I mentioned in the beginning, is the Forest Conservation Law. So if the project is subject to the Forest Conservation Law, it may require mitigation for removal of large trees. There's also the Tree Canopy Law, which is based on the limits of disturbance rather than individual trees as well. So I'd suggest looking into those. But there is one jurisdiction I know of that has their own tree protection ordinance, and that's Tacoma Park. So I'd suggest looking into that and then advocating for what you'd like to see in Bethesda. And I do think that that type of law, an individual tree protection law, makes more sense on a municipality or a local level rather than countywide. I think it's a little more feasible to implement. Great question. All right, I'm going to
So,
look at the Q&A myself. Go ahead, Emily.
so our second question is, what makes a plant invasive?
Oh, what a great question. So invasive plants, or you might hear them called non-native invasive, or NNI for short. That's sort of a term we use a lot. These are types of vegetation or plants that have evolved in a completely different ecosystem. Typically, seeds have been transported here either by accident or they've been incorporated as ornamental landscape plants. And they don't have any natural predators or competition, so they can easily take over a landscape and outcompete native species, which is exactly what we don't want. We want our landscapes to be comprised of diverse native species, which help to boost a resilient ecosystem. So in reforestation and tree planting, the most challenging NNIs to manage are typically vines, non-native invasive vines. Some examples are like mile-a-minute, kudzu, porcelainberry, Japanese honeysuckle is another one. And these are particularly problematic for young trees and forests generally because those vines can climb up over top of trees and block the sunlight and prevent photosynthesis from taking place.
Great. So our third question is, how does or does not the Reforest Montgomery program coordinate with DEP's Tree Montgomery program?
Mia, do you want to take
Sure.
that one?
Yeah, so I can take this. Those that don't know, the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection has a program called Tree Montgomery, which is very similar to our free shade tree program on a much larger scale. Um, Tree Montgomery, it has the only difference between our application processes is that Tree Montgomery keeps an ongoing wait list, so you can apply at any point and they'll add you to their list and get to you when they get to you, in contrast to our strict February 1st and October 1st application dates. We are in touch with the staff at Tree Montgomery, and we recommend that people apply to them if we're not able to accommodate their application, and they do the same thing for us. Another difference is that we offer small trees, whereas Tree Montgomery only offers larger trees. So there are some reasons why one program or another may be a better fit for any individual homeowner that we'd recommend them looking into or reaching out to us, and we're happy to talk through.
Great. So our fourth is, what do the survival rates look like for the reforestation and tree planting projects?
Oh, another good one. So I can start with answering that for reforestation, and then Mia, if you want to talk about survival rates for tree planting and how we calculate and work with those, we can split it up that way. So with reforestation, as you saw in one of the final slides that I had there, um, we hold ourselves to the same survival requirements that are in the forest conservation law. So any developer that might need to, or applicant that might need to meet requirements of the forest conservation law are held to the same survivability standards for planted forests. And that's somewhere between 75 and 100%. For our programs, what we do, since we monitor and maintain these programs for a long period of time, we try to replant around the 3-year point, or maybe a little before that if we are under that benchmark. Um, and after about 5 years, we look at removing the deer caging, but sometimes we wait a little longer if we're concerned, if there's, a lot of deer in the area, if there's a deer corridor there, or if the trees just haven't grown quite as fast or established their canopy as much as we'd like to yet. So we definitely replace trees to make sure we're hitting at least 75 to 100% survival. As I mentioned, we overplant in some cases as well to assume some of that loss, which is natural. Um, and typically it takes about 10 years to reach canopy closure, and that's why we're starting to see canopy closure at that Watts Branch project, for example. Um, and then for free reforestation, those projects come with a 2-year warranty on those trees. So while we do still overplant a little bit and we assume some loss, we hold ourselves to the same survivability standards for free reforestation on private properties. And then before the 2-year point, we're going to be reassessing to make sure that we're providing replacement trees under that warranty for the private properties. And Mia, do you want to talk about tree
Yeah.
planting survivability?
So for our large tree transplant program in parks, we're near pretty much 100% survivability on these. These trees are sort of the perfect size for transplanting. They're not so big that we can't transplant nearly their whole root system, but they're large enough that they can withstand stresses in terms of weather. We're typically planting in open park areas, so they're not really facing any threats from invasives as well. For our free shade tree program, like I mentioned, we have a 1-year warranty on those trees. Typically, it's around 3 to 5% of trees each season that we see needing to replace through the warranty. We are working towards doing a survivability study on past recipients of free shade trees. I know there are a few people on the call who received trees from us a few years ago. We're also always happy to hear from you individually. If you want to send us pictures of trees and let us know how we're doing, that's great because we really plant far more trees than we're able to keep up with.
I see a question in the chat from Betsy. Emily, is it okay if I address that one? This is
Go
about
for
tree
it.
selection recommendations. Okay, great. So Betsy, I see your question is, how are your tree selection recommendations changing with global warming, harsh rain, and the increase in wet/rooting roots? For example, sugar maples are no longer doing well. That's such a great question. Mia, if you want to just go back up to that slide where I have the climate change projections.
Yeah.
I will say that this resource that's pictured on the right here, which we've sent the link to in the chat as well, so you can check it out. This is one of the most helpful resources for us in really trying to do our best to predict what trees to recommend and what trees to select for our reforestation and our tree planting programs. So for example, the tree planting program that Mia manages, the free tree program, has a short list of, is it about 20 trees, Mia?
Mm-hmm.
It's about 20 trees. It used to be a wider list, and we kind of ran that list through this resource and removed trees that were not projected to withstand some of these conditions that you're referring to here, like increased heat, rain, and wet areas where trees' roots are going to be. So your example of maples is a really good example. So we have a lot of maples in the county already planted. So one, reason that we removed them was to increase diversity of other types of species, not maples, through our programs. And also through this list, you'll see that maples their projections are not very good for our changing climate either. So some of the trees that we do plant like two that come to mind, especially for withstanding rain, but also periods of extreme heat and dryness as well. There are some trees that really can withstand both. Two that come to mind for me are swamp white oak and river birch. So we do plant a significant number of those trees, and I've seen them do quite well, even during our really hot summers. That's such a great question, Betsy. Thank you for asking that. Okay, Emily, is there another question we should address?
We have another one. So how do you determine where the special forest zones are? Are these pure forest or is there development there?
So I think they're probably referring to our priority areas for forest. Let's see, let me see if I can find, oh, I do see this question. Okay, so how do you determine where its special forest zones are? Yeah, so feel free to go ahead and reply to your comment if I have this wrong, but I think you're probably talking about the priority areas. Mia, I don't know if you can go back a few slides so we can see the map of those areas. It's going to be right there. So these areas were more recently selected when we provided recommendations for no net loss of forest, which is the amendment that just passed the county council and became enacted earlier this month. And what we looked at in order to select these areas was how much forest loss was experienced in these different watersheds over the past 20 years. And also, what's the current level of forest? So what percentage of forest are we seeing in the watersheds? And that's specific for the watersheds. I see there's a new comment. Let me just check that out. Yes, priority areas, great. So we basically looked at forest loss and forest cover in the watersheds and then selected the watersheds with the highest rate of forest loss and the lowest forest cover and prioritized those four. The special protection areas are intended to protect sensitive environmental features, and they're set separately in the environmental guidelines, but forests and planting new forests, expanding forest is a key element in protecting those resources and boosting the health of those resources too. So that's why the special protection areas are included. Great question.
So another question we have is a lot of reforestation projects plant trees in a row like crops. This does not look natural. Are there requirements for planting trees to be more naturalized?
That's a good question. Some of the reasons that that you might see trees planted in rows, and sometimes we call them offset rows, so it's sort of a diamond or a diagonal pattern, is because in some cases, if there were a lot of non-native invasive species in the area that need to be managed while the forest grows, it's important for a mower to be able to pass through between the trees. I know sometimes it doesn't look all that natural, but as the trees grow and the understory eventually develops, you lose that pattern and it does feel a bit more natural. But I will say, some of our projects look more like that because mowing is necessary, and some of them we don't need to mow, or we're going to manage invasives in a different way. So we try to have more of an organic layout in that case. Um, are there requirements for planting plants to be more naturalized? So yes, in that latter example that I provided, in some cases we can do that.
So our next question is, what happens to the signs?
Yeah, so we have free shade tree signs that we put in front of all our front yard trees. These signs are pretty much like any yard sign. They're not the most eco-friendly. So we do just ask people to let us know if they're done with them, if they feel like they've done their job or they don't feel like having them in their yard anymore. And we do pick them up and reuse them. So we haven't actually gone through that many signs at this point since we've got an ongoing cycle going.
And it looks like this might be our last question, unless anybody has any more. How many trees have been planted in equity focus areas since introducing EFAs as a first priority area?
Yeah, so I can't give you exact numbers, but for our free shade tree program this season, for example, we're up to 25% of our trees being planted in equity focus areas. For reference, that's significantly less than the population, than the percentage of the population of Montgomery County that lives in priority funding areas. So we're still working to get a roughly even split for like a tree to population ratio. So ultimately, not many people are getting boxed out, and it's very important that we have that prioritization still.
It looks like we have another question. Is there a preferred watering method between watering bags and using the hose trickle method?
Mm. Mia, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can take it. So we promote both of these methods through our free shade tree program and through our watering alerts. The hose trickle method, for reference, is just putting a hose on a trickle at the base of a tree for 1 to 2 hours. And both of these methods are viable. There are significant drawbacks to the hose, which is that you just have to remember after 2 hours to go and turn your hose off. If you're going across a sidewalk, there may be tripping hazards. So in some areas, if you're too far from a hose bib, you might need a watering bag, or if you have multiple trees, you may prefer watering bags because trying to water 4 trees with a hose could turn into an 8-hour endeavor. So there are reasons people might prefer watering bags. They're pretty cheap in general, $20 roughly, but hoses work just as well if none of those drawbacks apply to you.
See, I think, oh, there is another question. I see a question from Mary Jo. Let's see. Do you see a situation where the amount of money collected through fee and lieu will run short and not be able to continue to support these programs? Great question, Mary Jo. So at the moment, I don't see that happening. We're currently spending um, right on par with what we're taking in. So we're able to sort of budget out our programs on an annual basis based on how much fee and lieu we're taking into the fund, with a little bit of a cushion as well, to make sure that if we go slightly over budget or we need just a little more or less, that there's some cushion there, some additional funding just in case. Do we have any other questions? I don't see any just give everyone a few more seconds to enter any final questions that you have into the chat. We do have a few more minutes if needed. Not seeing any final questions, so we can leave it there. But if you did have a lingering question that we didn't get to today, feel free to email us. Again, that email address is reforest@montgomeryplanning.org. We'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation outside of the webinar. The webinar also it has been recorded, so it will be posted to our website, montgomeryplanning.org/reforest, sometime in the next week or so you can send the link around. And again, if you are looking for landscape architect continuing education credits, keep an eye out for the competency quiz, which Emily will send to all registrants in the next day or two.